Before I call the member for Moriata, I'd like to acknowledge the presence in the gallery today and welcome Vicky Chapman, the former Deputy Premier of South Australia and Attorney General. Great to have you back, Vicky. Simon Birmingham is also here, former Senator for South Australia and Senior Minister in the Federal Liberal Government. And Michelle Lenzick's also here from another place. Good to have all three of you here in the House of Assembly for an important speech. The member for Moriata.
Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. I love South Australia and I love my local community. It has been an honour to serve as its local MP over the last 16 years. There's 35 minutes or so of this and it's a bad sign that I'm starting to get emotional at that. I've endeavoured to keep service at the forefront of my mind during that time. We build almost nothing by ourselves in life or in politics, and for the role I've been privileged to play, I'm very grateful to all of the people who've supported me along the way. All of these valedictory speeches already this week, and I'm sure next week will be the same, have been very different. And to be honest, I've been tying myself in knots over the last couple of weeks trying to work out exactly what to say. What is the purpose of a valedictory? Is it like a graduation? Is it an exit interview? Is it an indulgence? Sir, for me, this speech is for my girls. I hope it helps them understand what I've been up to for so much of the first years of their lives. Sir, I'm grateful for every day that I get to spend with my beloved wife, Trudy, and our precious girls, Emma and Eleanor. They have laughs that will fill the room, and they have smiles that will light up the dark. Sir, Emma is as inquisitive as Marie Curie, as creative as Taylor Swift, and as big-hearted as Dolly Parton. Without pause or a second thought, she will give up her new toy to a friend of hers who's hurt herself so that she can have a little bit of comfort. She's curious and she's eager to explore all the world has to offer. And we have no doubt she'll go far as the eye can see, in whatever direction she chooses. Eleanor is always willing to show compassion to those in need. She is equally as inquisitive and eager to learn. Her creativity knows no limit, and she loves to express herself, whether on a stage, or in an ice cream shop, or in our home at 5:30 in the morning, always driven by a joy that fills our hearts. And Eleanor, will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. For Trudy and for me, being Emma and Eleanor's mum and dad is the greatest blessing in our lives, and they bring us happiness in measures beyond our dreams. The adventures we undertake together, the stories we discover together, and the life we are building together are central to everything that motivates me. And from their birth up until now, I've sought to channel my hopes for their best futures living in our community and living in this state as motivation for my work as an MP. And it's been a privilege to do so. But sir, there are many ways that we can serve our families without making the compromises that political life requires, and so I'm going to do that from now on. Emma and Eleanor have had some suggestions about what that might look like. Their top idea is that I become an ice cream person, because that would enable me to bring ice cream home from work every day. And they are very clever. They make a good case. May be the case. Whatever comes next for me professionally, I'm just looking forward to the new challenges. So at its best, I've found my time in politics to be an opportunity for service, a chance to advocate for my community and my values. Whether through helping a constituent solve a tricky problem or through undertaking major reform work for the betterment of our state with the team behind me, we always work to make our state better, and I've loved those aspects of the job. But politics, sir, is also an adversarial contest. It requires wells of patience, resilience, and a hunger to fight for your cause. As MPs, we expect to face long and unpredictable hours, disruptions from family life, robust accountability and constructive character assessments from strangers and colleagues alike. But all of this can be very hard for families to endure. Depending on your reserves of patience and endurance, it can be hard for the MPs to endure as well. To do this job justice sustainably, your heart must be in it, and you ideally need a good level of support as well. So to Trudy, Emma and Eleanor, who have given me so much of that love and support while my heart was in the work, for bearing with me while I've been doing the work, I give my first and most sincere thanks to you. Thanks next to my mum and my dad, the earliest adopters of the John Gardner for Morialta concept, as well as our broader family for their love and support. Thank you to my godchildren for letting me be a part of your lives. Ava, I'll never be allowed to forget this. Astrid Wetton and Ava Flett were very little when I was elected, but they are now strong young women, both of them confident in their principled beliefs. They are compassionate sisters, they are loving daughters, and they are engaged citizens in our community. Astrid's just been through year 12. She finished a day or two ago, and Ava will have that pleasure next year. And I can't wait to see what they achieve. I'm looking forward to having more time and opportunity to cheer them on from the sidelines along with their beautiful families. So I was about their age. In fact, I just turned 17 when I joined the Liberal Club and the Young Liberals in my first, in O Week, in my first year at Adelaide Uni. It was Paul Keating's last week as Prime Minister, and Dean Barron was our State Premier. I paid my $5. I picked up my free Cooper's Pale Ale, which I was not legally allowed to drink at that time. And 5 days later, I watched the election results come in on the Unibar screens at the Oval. At the time, my friend Michelle Lensink was President of the South Australian Young Liberals. It's been a privilege to serve as her colleague, and in about 2 years' time, I'm very much looking forward to congratulating her when she takes her place as the longest-serving female member of this parliament in its state's history. I offer my thanks to my former employers, Trish Worth, Vicky Chapman and Christopher Pine, who all served their state and nation with passion and integrity. They gave me a chance and they taught me an enormous amount about how to get results for our community. I thank the members of the Morialta SEC for choosing me as their candidate, especially the committee members and volunteers who have gone above and beyond in their efforts to first help me win Morialta from the Labor Party and then hold it 3 more times. Now the SEC, well led by President Christian Diulio and Secretary Jake Vercheshen, has a new job to do, and I wish them well. Projects such as the upgraded Paradise Interchange and the new Morialta Secondary College will benefit our community for decades to come, but there's always more to do. And I'm pleased our Liberal candidate for Morialta, Scott Kennedy, is now taking up that fight, including his support for the desperately needed upgrades to the dreadful Mills Road, St Bernard's Road and Arthur Street intersections. There's fights that he's taking for our local community to be heard when it comes to the future of the McGill campus of UniSA. And in the north of Morialta, Scott is fighting for a comprehensive effort to stop the spread of giant pine scale in its tracks and rehabilitate affected areas for our local community. So it may be news to the House if they haven't been watching my speeches, but Scott Kennedy is a lifelong local whose record of service includes his entire adult life as a volunteer firefighter, and it's a pleasure to support him in his campaign. I offer thanks to residents in Morialta who have voted for me since 2010, and I offer thanks to those who haven't. Alike, I encourage them all to now support Scott Kennedy. So I dedicated a whole separate speech last sitting week to naming and thanking my staff, who kept me on track along the way, and I recognise them here. To my parliamentary colleagues, I thank you all. It would be inappropriate to name a gold class who stand out as those I admire most, so instead I will highlight the service of just one, former Premier Stephen Marshall. Stephen Marshall led the state through the most difficult time the world has seen in 70 years, and we came to the other side in better shape than pretty much anywhere else in the world. His leadership was a blessing, and his legacy will endure. He was also an enormous support to me as Education Minister, and many of the achievements in that portfolio that took place during his term as Premier were only possible thanks to that support. He and I were elected together in 2010. Our local campaign managers were Courtney Morecambe and James Stevens, and we were generously supported by the popular local federal member Christopher Pine and Senator Simon Birmingham. Liberal leader Isabel Redmond was generous with her time and support during the campaign. At the time, I was the youngest in this House at 31, and the second youngest was Jack Snelling, who was 41 and had been the youngest for the previous 13 years. I'm 46 now, sir. If I was elected at this age back in 2010, I would have been the 8th youngest person in that chamber. things have moved on. It was a very different chamber, and there are opportunities, some really positive opportunities for cultural improvement that I've seen over the last few years and I've been very encouraged by. As I found my feet in the early years, I used the freedom that comes with not having a portfolio to explore a few issues that had not gained broader traction with others. I introduced bills to require web streaming of the Parliament and to ban the supply of alcohol by adults to minors without parental consent. While neither bill passed, both became reality, although obviously the streaming of Parliament would have happened whether I was here or not. But I am proud of the secondary supply bill. It wasn't a universally popular policy then or now, but it was the right thing to do, and I'm proud that the Parliament was able to incorporate it into other laws during the time of the Wetherell government. Other early efforts included a successful private member's bill to repeal a very odd law which prevented parents of adoptees from publicly identifying themselves as such, and a successful campaign to enable Chinese adoptees to gain Australian birth certificates. As a result of that change, many of those adoptees in question, there's about 300 of them in this state, they're now adults, and they've been able to travel internationally on an Australian passport that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to get. I served on 2 parliamentary committees during my time. My favourite is the Legislative Review Committee, and frankly, I think all of you should be lining up to be on that committee after the election, any of you who are still here, because it does really important work in ensuring good governance of our departments and, very importantly, of our council bylaws. I thank the diligent staff who have supported the committee during my 2 separate appointments. The other, sir, was the Joint Parliamentary Service Committee, a body usually deeply resistant to parliamentary reform, with the exception of one during my time. With bipartisan support from all of the 3 delegates from this chamber, I'm pleased to say, and one stray legislative councillor who must have been persuaded unexpectedly during the debate, we took the bold step of opening the gate outside Old Parliament House. And soon we will celebrate 10 years of unfettered access to the footpath of North Terrace, despite the dire warnings at the time, and as far as I'm aware, no one has had a serious injury yet. As a shadow minister, I worked hard to ensure that our policy proposals were relevant, consistent with our values, credible with stakeholders, and, frankly, most importantly, likely to improve people's lives. One factor I am glad I kept in mind was whether or not they were actually capable of being done. You'd be surprised, sir, or maybe you wouldn't, but our guests might be surprised at how many suggestions come to us without having consideration being given to whether they were legally or ethically or even physically possible. Having been appointed Minister for Education in March 2018, I worked with some excellent public servants who helped deliver these proposals, and I offer them all my thanks. I was fortunate, sir, in my Chief Executive of the Education Department, Rick Pearce. He added value to our work through his own initiative while remaining faithful to the government's agenda in the best traditions of the public service. He ensured that the juice was worth the squeeze, that we were always focused on shifting the dial, and that we always kept in mind, of course, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I apologise to him for my regular threats to reintroduce Latin as a compulsory subject in the junior secondary curriculum. Much as I would have loved to have done it, and I still think we should, I do recognise that there will be challenges finding the workforce. It's worth acknowledging that 2 of our biggest achievements, Year 7 to high school and flexible industry pathways for senior secondary students, were originally championed by David Pisoni, my predecessor as the Liberal spokesman for education for 8 years. I tried to ensure subsequently that our policy documents were clear in their principles and their purpose and realistic in their assumptions. In government, the teams led by Carolyn Crozer-Barlow and Claire Fezchak had flexibility and licence to be creative in helping us deliver these projects. In both cases, Caroline and Claire and their teams added significant value, and the delivery exceeded expectations. Year 7 to high school in particular was a massive commitment, the biggest structural change to our public schooling system in 100 years. We set ourselves a 2022 start date, which thankfully turned out to be just enough time, literally by days. We persuaded Cabinet to authorise a level of funding for the project that allowed the transition team confidence and flexibility to solve problems creatively. And thanks to that work, the transition went well, and Year 7 students in South Australia now undertake their specialist high school subjects in specialist high school settings with specialist high school teachers. Sir, my office tells me that I was responsible for the carriage of 18 bills through the House during my time as Minister. I had a look at the list earlier today, and a couple of the bills jumped out at me. I was trying to work out why I was responsible for ticket scalping legislation and a criminal procedure bill. And then I remembered the glorious week when Vicky Chapman was away, and for 6 days I was our state's first law officer as Acting Attorney General. A happy time for someone with a Bachelor of Arts majoring in languages and classics. Of all the times I've ever been on the telly, having that screenshot under my name is my favourite. In education, the most significant reform was undoubtedly the establishment of a new Education Act, which we discussed yesterday in the context of the member for Port Adelaide's involvement, and will forever contain, of course, the key clause underlining how we saved Christmas in our public schools. Other highlights from the period include TAFE SA's full reaccreditation and the restoration of its reputation after the ASQA quality audit scandal. The introduction of Clontarf academies to South Australia, along with the Teach for Australia program. The Swift Internet program. Telstra delivered fibre optic connectivity to 900 sites around South Australia, taking us from the slowest internet on the mainland to the fastest internet speeds in the country. There was a $1.5 billion works program, including 5 new schools and more than 100 school upgrades. I thank the now Minister, the member for Wright, for his very important work as a member of our team at the time. Everybody working that project knew that if there was so much as a minor slip, an erroneous email suggesting that things might be late, then the member for Wright would be on morning radio, giving us hell, and the fear of that helped motivate many people in our team. Securing cabinet agreement for our early learning strategy in the 2021 budget was also a good day, and I'm glad at its retention and expansion of many of its projects by the Malinowskis government. The History Trust's year-long celebrations of the centenary of the epic flight, culminating in securing funding to move the Vickers Vimy into the new Adelaide Airport terminal. We also assisted in seed funding through the History Trust through the Education Department for the educational program, and the History Trust for the curatorial assistance in the establishment of the Adelaide Holocaust Museum and Steiner Education Centre. Finally, one of our youth arts organisations, Windmill Theatres, did extraordinarily well when they took advantage of Victoria's extended COVID lockdowns to bring the preparations and rehearsals for Bluey's big play world premiere here to South Australia. They populated the production with South Australian actors who were then able to tour the world, and on a personal note, this was the first chance that our family got to all together go to the theatre when Eleanor and Emma went to their first stage theatre production as Her Majesty's was reopening for a live performance. It was fantastic. Even more significant, hard as it is to imagine anything being more significant than Bluey's big play, and it's an area of public policy where more remains to be done, relates to the way in which we teach our children, what we teach our children, and how we can better integrate the science of learning within our schools. Our literacy guarantee policy measures embedded phonics, explicit instruction, and an understanding of the learning sciences in the lower primary years around the state. New resources were provided for schools. We overhauled the assessment methodology of student progress, replaced running records with dibbles and so forth. We put massive new resources into teacher training, professional development, and coaching in evidence-based pedagogy. We wanted to ensure that we were aligning our teaching with best practice for all students, but most importantly for students with dyslexia, ADHD and other learning difficulties, too often consigned to be considered naughty or uninterested in their schooling because they'd never been effectively taught to read. So there's a very positive bipartisan story here, because at the same time I was doing my research and reading books by clever people like Edie Hirsch and Daniel Willingham, talking to stakeholders, advocates, educators and academics, the member for Port Adelaide was doing the same. She was talking to a lot of the same people. The government was moving in a similar direction. The most notable feature in our literacy guarantee policy was the new Year 1 phonics check. So the phonics check was the brainchild of former UK Schools Minister Nick Gibb. Now, Sir Nick Gibb. I always want to say Sir Nicholas because, anyway. I commend to you all Sir Nick's book, recently released, called Reforming Lessons. It outlines the story of how declining standards in England were turned around over a decade, to the point where by the time of the last election, English school student results had climbed dramatically to being near the top of the OECD tables in their performance. Dr. Jennifer Buckingham, then of the Centre for Independent Studies, had been a very high-profile campaign effectively advocating for these programs around Australia, and it was starting to gain traction. Then Federal Minister, the exceptional Simon Birmingham, was encouraging all states to get on board. The member for Port Adelaide under her ministerial responsibility, South Australia became the first jurisdiction to put their hands up to conduct a trial, and we had, of course, also announced our policy in a similar area. So in 2017, the Department for Education secured agreement from London to borrow their cheque. I think we paid $1 for it for the previous year in 50 South Australian schools. Our commitment for the Liberal Party went further than the trial. We committed to mandate it in all public schools, but in time for the election, the Xenophon Party and the Labor Party had matched that promise too. Bipartisan support for the new approach helped us overcome opposition from the union and reticence from educators who were very sceptical about the approach. Delivery of the commitment was made much easier by the trial backed up by expert analysis commissioned under the former government by respected researchers at Flinders University, including who gave us some excellent advice about how to improve it in following years. So the most dramatic improvements in our phonics check results have been among our most vulnerable students, our most vulnerable cohorts of students. And now, I think we are 7 years on from the first one. There are far more kids in these cohorts through the primary years who are able to read as they progress through those primary years. Between 2017 and 2022, South Australia had the most significant increase in our NAPLAN results of any state. Many of those teachers, educators and principals who were sceptical before have subsequently shifted their views as they've seen improvements in the classrooms. Non-government schools are getting on board too. Just last week, I was at Ross Trevor College in my electorate, the alma mater of both our Liberal leader Vincent Tarzia and also our Liberal candidate for Morialta, the lifelong local volunteer firefighter Scott Kennedy. That school's overhaul of their approach to the primary years, in line with the science of learning, has delivered rapid growth in their phonics check results and their NAPLAN data too. Pretty much everywhere in every state in Australia is somewhere along this path, and New Zealand has gone even further. So-called reading wars now seem to be over, but the ground that has been won must be protected vigilantly, and that's why I talk about this. That's why I encourage all policymakers to familiarise themselves with these issues and with the international evidence around learning science, which continues to develop. I had hoped we would have more than 2 years to implement further reforms, but we were overtaken by events. In retrospect, I wish we'd gone further faster in this space and worked towards a more knowledge-rich curriculum in South Australia. At the risk of sounding old-fashioned, when it comes to what our students learn, we need to ensure that they will be exposed to the great ideas and the texts that have had culturally enduring significance for hundreds and thousands of years. This is perhaps most important of all in our public school system, lest the advantages and opportunities of that cultural capital be consigned only to children who grow up in those homes where the bookshelves are already full. The final aspect of this time that can't go unmentioned is the impact of COVID. I spoke about this at length earlier in the week, but in brief I want to reiterate that our children and young people and the communities around them were served extraordinarily well by South Australia's education workforce. When the world was turned upside down, we worked hard to ensure our schools were the most normal places in our society. And from the Premier on down, everyone was doing their best with the information we had. But for as long as that information suggested that we could keep public schools open, with as many students attending as possible, then that was our consistent ambition. I remember Courtney Morecambe calling me up almost every morning, checking that that was still our plan, and it was, and we did pretty well. In addition to the teams within the Education Department led by Rick Peirce, along with SA Health, I also want to highlight the non-government sector led by Neil McGoran at Catholic Education and Carolyn Grant-Scowens at the Association of Independent Schools at the time. No other jurisdiction in Australia had such close and working relationships between their sectors and their health department, and it contributed to the fact that while we would love to have not had a global pandemic that killed tens of thousands of people around the world and disrupted everything in everyone's lives, so at least South Australia's school students had less disruption to their learning and school attendance than pretty much any other jurisdiction in the world. So this week in these valedictories, there's been a lot of reflection by members about their core values. We respect conviction and consistency. Constancy is preferable to treachery. Virtue and principle are more appealing than graft and transactionalism. But as somebody who's never wanted the perfect to be the enemy of the good, I want to offer a positive word for pragmatism in our considerations as well. The pragmatist foregrounds the importance of getting outcomes for the people we serve. It's not about limiting the ambition of what we try and do, but rather tempering it with our judgment about what is possible. Compromise does not mean capitulation if it results in better outcomes for the communities we've been elected to serve. Certainly compared to what would otherwise be possible. One of the things that sometimes bothers me about politics is the expectation that MPs have to immediately respond to new events or developments without having had the chance to investigate deeply, discover what all the facts might be, or consider the implications of an issue in depth. One example, about a week after ChatGPT had been released to the world, I was criticised by a journalist for not yet having determined the Liberal Party's position on the use of artificial intelligence in schools. It's an issue on which I now have a lot of views. It's okay, I'm not going to go through them today. But the point is, at the time I was asked, it would have been negligent, it would have been irresponsible and foolish for me to form a position that was then going to tie myself and my colleagues based on a vibe of something that nobody really had any understanding about at the time. An opinion once stated, especially in this place, can be hard to retract. There's a natural pressure for politicians to stick to opinions long after the evidence should have persuaded them to a different position. So while I encourage all members to be true to their values and mindful of their purpose, I also encourage them to reflect that wisdom requires a willingness to change your point of view when the evidence demands it. In terms of my own political values, I consider myself a pragmatic Liberal with both a small L and a big L. In a world where some of the best governments are built on stable coalitions, whether formal or informal, whether within a party or between them, I welcome the fact the party I represent is home to two great philosophical traditions with enormous sympathy and complementarity. And I know a great many loyal Liberals with both liberal and more conservative views who feel the same way. I consider myself a classical Liberal because I value freedom of the individual freedom for the individual to maximise their potential according to their lights and to pursue their best life without unnecessary constraint in any form from the state. By the same token, classical Liberal thought has always understood that society needs a strong safety net to catch people as they might fall or help them up if they need it. I'm also happy to be associated with the mainstream conservative tradition that so values the institutions that have protected our liberties from extremism. It asks of us that we offer evidence to justify the benefits of reform as compared to the status quo, rather than just assuming that new is always better, and a reasonable dose of that in any government can be a good thing. Conservatives and Liberals working together in the best interests of our state and nation, in no way reactionary, but rejecting the stifling homogeneity of a socialist panacea, is exactly what Menzies had in mind for the Liberal Party, and he said as much. That's how we operate when we're at our best. I'm pleased that my Liberal colleagues in this building take that view too, and I hope they all have the opportunity to put that approach in practice once again in government in service to the people of South Australia. I started this speech talking about my family, and I return to them now. My parents and Trudy and our girls. So I'm conscious that I have led a fortunate life. My parents worked through far greater challenges than I ever have had to face. I think all of our parental instincts is to work hard for our children so that they have more opportunities than us. And Trudy's and my parents did that for us through their hard work and sacrifices. I've spoken about my parents in this place on a number of times. My parents-in-law, Lynn and Lorenzo Mercurio, also came to this country as children, in their cases from Coventry and San Giorgio La Malata, respectively. They've worked hard all their lives, and they can now take enormous pride in Trudy's and Mark's achievements. To Trudy, I love you so much. Our girls and I are very lucky that we get to spend our lives with you. Trudy is a first in family to go to university, with bachelor's degrees from Flinders University and postgraduate qualifications from St Andrews University in Scotland. Her legal career may now be freed from the significant impediments that my job has continually and routinely placed in her way. She sets an extraordinarily wonderful example for our girls. She offers them her strength, her care and love every day. For nearly 7 years, she did so while I was a minister or deputy opposition leader, out 5 or 6 nights a week, missing early mornings, and all too often my mind wandering to work issues when I was at home during what should have been dedicated family time. Like many of our partners, she has borne witness to the worst aspects of our jobs. In signing up as candidates, we implicitly agree to some intrusions on our lives, but our partners do not. Yet she has been steadfast in her love and support for me and the work I have sought to do. She has regularly given me insightful advice. She's been my partner in our engagement with community, and she has ensured that while our girls want for nothing, they never take anything for granted. Our girls will always be taught that much is expected of those to whom much is given. Our girls love and appreciate their mum. When I asked Eleanor if there was anything she wanted me to say on her behalf during this speech, she stopped for a moment and wrote a little note. She wrote her name, Eleanor, she wrote a love heart, and she wrote Mummy. She went on to ask me to say the following: Mummy likes bananas. Mummy likes to play with me. Mummy is the best person in our family. And who could argue with that? Emma also had a wise comment to offer. And I quote, Mummy is a kind and generous person. She is lovable and she loves us. She's the best person in the world. So for many years in this role, I've woken up looking forward to my days, and I've gone to sleep confident that I've done my best to do something useful. So why am I now so extraordinarily happy to move on? So I think my friends are all too aware I've not had a moment's regret since announcing my decision last year, and I've had some opportunities to reflect on this question too. You're going to have to bear with me at this point. I've spent the last 16 years being told to ensure I relate to people, that I'm electable, that I use appropriate pop culture references in speeches. That ends now, sir. More than 2,000 years ago, travellers seeking wisdom from the oracle at Delphi were confronted at the Temple of Apollo with an inscription of its most important lesson. I'm not going to do the Greek. It said in English, know thyself. It's a very simple command, but it rings true to me today. To live our best life for ourselves, or even more importantly, for those around us, we need to ensure we have an appreciation of our strengths and our limitations. Unless we can find the courage to admit uncertainty and reflect on our weaknesses, how can we possibly serve others as we should? Plato wrote in the Republic that the punishment for refusing to participate in politics is to be governed by someone worse. Unfortunately, after a while, it starts to feel like the punishment for continuing to participate in politics is that it requires continued participation in politics. So I'll take my chances and move on. From the 22nd of March next year, I plan to follow the advice of the 2nd century Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. If you're not sure, think Richard Harris in Gladiator. He wrote in his Meditations, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He also wrote, in your actions, don't procrastinate. In your conversations, don't confuse. In your thoughts, don't wander. In your soul, don't be passive or aggressive. In your life, don't be all about business. I extend my respect to everyone who offers themselves in service to others, here or elsewhere, if here, whether for the first time or having served for much longer than I've lasted. Working in this Parliament offers an extraordinary opportunity to make a positive difference for our state and the people who live within it. I wish you all the best. Yeah.